It's my pleasure to welcome back to The Truth David and Humberto Cancio. They have become friends of mine since they came on The Truth a few months ago with their new book, Gabriel Locke, bringing Humberto's practice of law to real life. And they have actually authored two books now. David, Humberto, welcome back to The Truth.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having me.
How are the books doing?
They're doing really well. From a commercial standpoint, we're not millionaires yet. We're not quite at Stephen King's level or anything, but from a critical standpoint, they're doing exceptionally well. Book one was received, with all these glowing reviews, and actually book two has been received even better than that. So the good news is we're on the upward trend.
I'm very happy for you and very proud of you. Now, I want to talk about Cuba this morning because Humberto was born in Cuba in 1953. I wonder how I remember that one. And then he came to the United States in 1959, where he subsequently went to Duke undergraduate and then University of Florida Law School, and then enjoyed a successful practice of law in Miami. And he's raised a very nice son, too. David, he has become a co-author with his dad, which I think is pretty cool. And he went to NC State and majored in Spanish. Also speaks English and French fluently. My gosh, I'm still trying to master English. He's got an interest in soccer, traveling, and music and reading. And it's just a pleasure to have you all both back on The Truth. So, Humberto, what do you remember your formative years from 1953 to 1959? I had a similar experience, except my country of origin was Ohio. So, but almost the identical pattern. You moved to Miami when I moved from Ohio to Atlanta. And I remember those first 6 years so vividly.
Yeah, I have some memories. My father was a career naval officer under three different presidents in Cuba. And one of the first things that happened when Castro took over on January 1st of 1959 was that my father was arrested and subsequently tried for treason. That was customary by the communist government, who had not announced they were communist at that point. But my father managed to get a not guilty plea, and that was, a not guilty result. And that was primarily because my dad had been out of the country, so they couldn't make up the crime that they wanted to. They found the man, but they couldn't find the crime. So he had to escape from Cuba. It was very dramatic, and we managed to follow him by plane in September of '59.
I'll be darned. Well, that must have been a very stressful time for a 5-year-old. So
Yeah.
you followed your dad to Miami. Is that where you came?
Yep. We came to Miami. My dad was involved in anti-Castro activities for a year or two continuously. And then it was time to feed the family. So he began to work and eventually ended up working for a multinational corporation out of Cleveland, Ohio. Parker.
I'm sorry?
The multinational was out of Cleveland, Ohio. It was you may know it, Parker Hannifin. So he worked for Parker Hannifin for quite a few years.
I'll be darned. Cleveland used to have a bunch of Fortune 500 companies located there. It was quite an industrial capital. So what do you remember about Cuba when you were there as a young boy?
Well, I have a few memories of my grandparents' house, my other grandparents' house, and I have one particular memory, which was they put my father in a jail in a old Spanish castle that sits right on the bay, on Havana Bay. And I remember as a 5-year-old climbing the stairs to go to his cell to visit him. And I remember that the stairs, were far too large for a 5-year-old. And I also remember my mother being 9 months pregnant, climbing the stairs behind me. That's one very vivid memory. And the other one was at the beginning of January when the revolutionaries came in and how they were walking with guns in their hands and rosaries around their neck. And those rosaries turned out to be a lie. And those are two very vivid memories I have.
So much of communism turns out to be a lie, I believe. But what about the standard of living in Cuba at that time? Was it a nice place to live?
It was a wonderful place to live. Actually, without exaggeration, Cuba was an up and coming country. In They had diversified away from the sugar, using the sugarcane tree to do various number of things. They had begun producing candy. They were producing paper from the cane itself once the sugar was extracted. Very good quality paper. There were nickel mines in Cuba. There were tourism was developing very quickly. As a matter of fact, in 1958, there was the government had money left over, $748 million. So Cuba was well on its way in partnership with the United States, who was obviously our greatest trading partner. People could eat meat, they could eat chicken, they could eat eggs. Everything was available.
Everything they don't have now.
Well, yeah.
Have you been back? Have you been back since you
No,
left?
and I will not go back until the regime is no longer in existence.
What about you, David? Have you ever visited Cuba?
No, I've never gone. You know, part of the difficulty about having a grandfather that was tried for treason is that anyone with the surname Cancio is at risk of being either thrown in jail or possibly shot on sight. So it's not something I want to risk just yet, you know.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Good, smart boy. You done good, Humberto. So let me. I mean, did you see the Nick Shirley videos from Cuba a couple of weeks ago?
No, I haven't had a chance to see those. I'm sorry. I mean, the ones that I've seen from him have primarily been Minnesota and a lot of
Yeah.
other fraud.
Well, you know, Nick went to Cuba. He was planning on staying 3 days, and after he had been there a few hours, Cuba spies showed up on his doorstep and started following their every move.
Yeah.
And he really genuinely seemed to be in fear for his safety. He thought that he might be detained or worse, maybe locked up. Don't know. He doesn't know what the charges would have been, but a Cuban general came to the hotel where he was staying, and that's when he and his team decided that they better hightail it out of there.
Yeah.
And so they hatched an escape plan and left for the airport under cover of night, and then got there and were able to get out before they were detected. But he seemed genuinely apprehensive on these videos. But the main point is that the city, Havana, appeared to be in decay. I mean, you have all these old, beautiful buildings. The architecture, I'm told, in Cuba is really spectacular, but it's now crumbling because it's just fallen into disrepair, and not insignificantly because of the United States' activity there. There's a blockade on oil, and so nobody can drive. There's no fuel to motor the cars, and electrical blackouts is the norm. And Nick reported that doctors are operating with flashlights rather than electrical powered lights. And so it's really pretty spooky. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, before we get there, John, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Let me clarify a few things. Cuba has not had a lot of fuel many times in its recent history. As a matter of fact, in the 90s, the Havana buses were being drawn by oxen and not gasoline.
No kidding.
No kidding.
I had no
The
idea.
food has always been scarce. As a matter of fact, in those days, which was when the Soviet Union pulled out, picadillo, which is ground beef.
It's a traditional dish.
Traditional dish.
Ground beef with some spices.
Right. The government put out a recipe of how to make it with banana peels because there was.
Oh my gosh.
So this idea of the fact that the embargo has created this situation is not really correct. It's not really accurate, as a matter of fact.
Well, it certainly exacerbated it because, I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
there
Well, of course.
is,
Yeah.
it's gone from a shortage of fuel to no fuel.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly. But where it really hits it is that the fuel, when it comes in, it's first for the military. So the effect that it's had is actually not so much with the people, but rather with the military. They don't have
I
the
see.
fuel.
Right.
And that's key.
Well, and Castro was charged by the United States with murder earlier this week.
Yeah.
What's going on? I mean, he committed that murder some years ago.
Yeah.
Reportedly, he shot down 2 U.S. aircraft that were there on humanitarian missions and killed 4 people in the process.
Yeah. So if you look at why he's being indicted for this murder as opposed to anything else, right? This is something that at this point is what, 30 years old?
Yeah. Murder has no statute of limitation.
No statute of
But if you
limitations.
look at
correct.
it, Cuba's been a narco trafficking hub, just like Venezuela's been. So actually, the Department of Justice in this case has pretty much done exactly the same thing they did with President Maduro of Venezuela, where they're trying to get him on really a charge that'll stick. It's our belief that the reason why things have stalled a bit in terms of, I guess you could say the reason why things have stalled a bit in terms of the negotiations with Diaz-Canel and the Cuban regime is because the Castros are very reluctant to give up power. So we believe, and this is all just obviously our supposition, that by removing Raúl Castro, which all they need is one witness to say that he gave the order to either shoot down the planes, which were 1 shot each, or just to shoot down any planes that came in that area. If they can get one witness to testify that, which the United States probably wouldn't have put up those charges unless they already had a few candidates in mind to be that witness. But with that in mind, then they can actually have the legitimacy of the charges to be able to extract him from Cuba.
Yeah, what you have to bear in mind, John, is that about a decade ago, the families of these men that died actually sued the Cuban government in federal court and won. It was more than $100 million in damages, and they were able to collect because of the frozen Cuban assets that the United States possesses, and they were able to attach those. So there has already been a case in court.
Don't let my wife hear that. She'll be encouraging me to take a sightseeing tour over Cuba.
Anyway,
I'm just saying.
They were able to attach that and get the money. So there's already been a case in court where they've proven that the Castro government was at fault for these people's death. Now, all they have to do is, as David said, is to link Raul personally to the murder. And so that may not be as difficult as one would think, even though a lot of years have gone by, because I am sure that there's somebody who was there at the time who is now in the United States. And it's probably here because they promised to exchange their knowledge for being able to stay in the country.
Yes.
Well, don't you reckon that's a predicate for going and doing an extraction? I mean, if I were Raul and I was 94 years old, I think I would say, can we talk?
Right.
I mean, Maduro, he was arrogant. He thought he could flick us off and get away with it. And in fairness, that had been the practice in the past. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was very little accountability with our enemies, and we'd just let them do what they would, and maybe we'd slap some sanctions on them, but there was no meaningful accountability. But Maduro, the rules were changed with Maduro. So don't you suppose that we're either going to see Raul arriving in the United States, greeting photographers either in a suit or in an orange suit, one or the other? I think it's up to him at this point which way it goes down.
Well, that's exactly correct. I mean, the reality is, I've been talking about this subject now for probably the last couple of months, right? We've been called on to different shows, et cetera, that have asked, how long do you think this will last? And I gave them 3 to 5 months max. If this doesn't happen before Christmas, I'll send everybody $20 in the mail.
Well,
and the reason why
you're going to send everybody $20 in the mail, or just me?
Oh, I'll send you $20 in the mail for this. I'll just buy your lunch. We'll go to lunch again.
Okay, done.
But anyway,
deal.
The point being was that, when I thought about it, I'm like, what more of a precedent do you need? They just took out the leader of Venezuela. Everybody's scared. They went to Iran, and in a week we had knocked out 89 of their 250 guys.
3 layers of leadership.
So I'm sitting there thinking,
that's unprecedented, by the way. And through all the wars I'm familiar with, I don't remember ever removing the leader of the country with whom we were at war.
No.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm looking at all this thinking, what on earth is holding them up? I mean, Diaz-Canel's brighter than this. By now, he could have gotten at least $50 million at a nice apartment, probably, I don't know, in Moscow or something like that. He'd live like a king for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
Has to be another cog in the chain.
Well,
and this is it. And
according to rumors, the Castros have a $100 million house in Odessa, Russia, what used to be Russia. And maybe, Raul should think about taking a long vacation there and avoiding any other problems. The second thing we have is that I always wondered how Diaz-Canel came to have the position he has. And it turned out that he is the protege of Raúl Castro. And so Raul...
That who is the protege of Raul?
The present president of Cuba.
Diaz.
Oh.
Canel, yeah.
Well, I thought that was Raul. What was Raul's role?
Was the president.
Right.
When he steps down, he picks this man. And he picked,
I see.
He picked this man because he was his protege. So
I'm with you. Okay.
So he basically does what Raul tells him to do. And I think that is the problem, that they won't deal because Raul is still saying no.
Right.
Well, I think Raul is going to be saying no from a U.S. penitentiary pretty soon if he's not careful. And I mean, I zoom out 30,000 feet and I look at everything that's going on. It seems to me that President Trump is just cleaning up all the messes all over the world that have plagued us for the last 60 years. I mean, Iran has been a sponsor of terrorism for the last 50 years. They bombed the U.S. Embassy in Beirut. They attacked an Air Force base, killing our servicemen and women in Beirut. I mean, I've got 2 pages of fine print of all the horrible terrorist activities that they've either directly participated in or sponsored. And I think, to me, that you combine that with the fact that they killed 43,000 people this year of their own citizens in Iran. And you couple that with their attempt to develop a nuclear weapon. I mean, either one of those is provocation enough for me. So that's where I differ from Tucker and Megyn and whoever else, Alex Jones. I mean, I think that Trump has shown the courage and the leadership that no one has shown since the Iranians, the students took our embassy in 1978 and held 66 of our diplomats hostage for 445 days. That should have been dealt with by Reagan, in my opinion. And I guess the only reason that he didn't was maybe he felt indebted to the Iranians for him becoming president of the United States, because it definitely hurt Jimmy Carter dramatically that he wasn't able to resolve the hostage crisis. And the way that it went down, they released the hostages the day of Reagan's inauguration. It seemed like a pretty well orchestrated plan to me. And so I don't know what motivated Reagan. He should have gone in there and bombed the hell out of them, taken back our embassy and straightened the mess out then. But it lingered and it festered and nobody dealt with it. Not George Bush, not Bill Clinton, not Barack Hussein Obama, who actually ended up giving them money and removing the sanctions. What is the matter with that man? I don't think that he represented America's interests, frankly. I have no hesitancy of saying that very publicly. But then George W. Bush, he had a chance. He kind of maintained the status quo, it seemed like. So Trump comes to town and he's finally saying no more. Enough. Good for him.
Well, I think that we've been the recipients of a chemical war for a long time. The pandemic was just one aspect of it. I can't figure why a drug dealer who's interested in keeping people hooked on drugs would actually go and kill his clientele. So obviously, there's more than a monetary motive involved in the situation. And so, to me, at that point, it becomes a chemical warfare to kill our population and to destroy it, quite frankly. So, these countries, Venezuela, Cuba, and Mexico, are the conduit through which the Chinese make those deadly drugs reach us. And so, I think that uh, Trump is going about eliminating
The allies of
the
China.
allies of China in this matter. I got a rumor from a Venezuelan client of mine, and we were talking about the situation. He's living right now in Europe for a few months, and he said, everybody here in Europe considers Trump a terrible person and so forth. And we were talking. He said, what people don't realize is that the uranium that the Iranis have actually came from Venezuela. And this is a rumor now. The fact is that Maduro cut a deal with the Iranians. They would come and be able to dig the uranium and the gold out of Venezuela. And in exchange, they would keep all the uranium, half the gold, and Maduro would personally get the other half of the gold. And as a matter of fact, there's got to be some truth to it, because in one of the banks that the United States actually got to, they found a great deal of gold belonging to Maduro.
Wow.
So, people should put that in their pipe and think about it, because I think that there was a connection there, a direct connection between these two countries. And he hit Venezuela first, and now he hit Iran, and now he's going to Cuba. So, yeah, and I think there are other people in the line waiting
Yeah.
to be hit.
Well, it seems to me also that Trump is being pretty strategic in creating a iron wall around our country. If he is able to ultimately bring about effective regime change in Venezuela, maybe he already has, we'll see, and then Cuba next. I mean, that's a pretty dramatic barrier right there
Yeah.
from foreign interference. And then we've got Mexico, who is our ally to the south, Canada to the north, Hawaii and Alaska to the west, and then we'll see what happens to Greenland. Whether I guess they've said we're not for sale. I don't know. I didn't know you could buy a country, but I don't think Trump's done trying yet, and we'll see. But strategically, that's really pretty smart, don't you think?
Yeah, not only that, but if you figure that he's managed to cut off the oil from China, that pretty much does it. Because remember, they were getting oil out of Venezuela and Iran, and now they're both gone. So
I think she said, "Look, we won't buy Iranian oil anymore." And China, their economy is hurting right now as well. So it couldn't have come at a worse time for them. And I think what you said, Humberto, is absolutely spot on. I think Trump is brilliant in the way that he's going about engaging with China, and not confrontationally, but he's just hitting them where it hurts. And there's not much they can do about it, it seems. Including getting back fair trade through the Panama Canal, which they've swept in and taken over the canal that we gave to Panama, that we built with human sacrifice and a lot of money.
Yep.
So I think it's brilliant what he's doing. No, and I just think that Americans should unite behind him instead of all the fractured bitterness that we see, principally from the whacked left.
Well, let me tell you, we were walking around Washington, and it's much better than what it was, just 4 years ago under a different president. I can tell you that it's a much nicer reflection of this country, but there's still some whack jobs walking around.
But a whole lot less.
A whole lot less of them.
Yeah.
It's funny when we talk about Latin America, we sometimes have ignored it, and it is really a fantastic change that is brought about by Trump's philosophy and Rubio's execution. This shield of the Americas is the feeling that, hey, we need to protect ourselves as a continent or as two continents. And he has at the same time begun to push the Chinese out. The Chinese have been building facilities all over Latin America, and only for those countries to find out that the Chinese begin taking over little bit by bit. Peru has had that problem when the Chinese came in and built a harbor. And so we had to reverse that trend.
Yes.
And that's what we have also begun to do. And the first step was to cut off the flow of fentanyl and create that wall that you were talking about. And I think we're just seeing the first steps, and I think it will be continued. And I think that more and more we will get closer and closer to the countries in Latin America, quite frankly, because Europe has turned their back on us.
Do you have relatives still living in Cuba?
You don't.
I don't, but my wife does. So my son has relatives.
I do. Yeah. So I have quite a bit of an extended family on my mom's side. So my grandfather, my maternal grandfather was one of 9. He was the only one that came to the United States.
Oh, wow.
And,
So are you in touch with him at all, David?
yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm in touch with them fairly often because my grandparents actually call them pretty much every day. I'm my grandparents' caretaker, so they live in my house, and so I get to speak with my relatives. I get to talk to them quite often. Sometimes we'll even have a chance to FaceTime. As you can imagine, communication lately has been a little difficult, but for the most part.
So what do they report to you? What do they say that their living conditions are like right now?
Well, you can just tell every time you FaceTime them, right? You can tell by just if they were to go ahead and walk outside of their house and look around, you're going to see some beautiful nature because they're from the eastern part of Cuba, which was less affected than obviously Havana in the west. Typically, the rural areas in the east had a better infrastructure, still better education, et cetera. The decay wasn't quite as rapid or as bad. But yeah, I mean, you can just tell in terms of the quality of their everything from their clothes to the homes to, the things that we take for granted in the United States, such as dental aesthetics and overall cleanliness. And this is not to dump on my family, they're all respectable human beings, I promise. But it's just saying that you can just tell that there's subtleties that you can just tell in speaking with them and seeing the images behind them or around really town or anything like that. And they'll tell you, oh, today I had to walk 8 kilometers to get to the store because there's no fuel. And,
wow.
the horse wasn't up for it today if they still have a horse. I mean, it's a
My
whole number of
gosh.
things.
So what do they think about the United States? What do you suppose is in the mind of the average Cuban right now vis-a-vis the way they look at the U.S.?
They view the U.S. very favorably. I don't think there's anything negative that I've ever heard from anyone, whether it's my family or not, right? Because you meet people that get here and let's say they arrive in Miami or New York or Tampa or any of these places that traditionally have had Cubans arrive, and they'll tell you there's no country like this. I'll give you a prime example. My cousin, his name is Raiko. Raiko came to the United States because there were a set of protests in 2020. One of his friends happened to be there when the police I guess the secret police were really just attacking the protesters, etc. Long story short with that, his friend was there, then all of a sudden went missing. And I guess it's because the secret police were looking for him and he went into hiding. So they went to my cousin. They asked him, do you know where he is? He said, look, I haven't seen him since this day, but he was a very close friend of his, so they didn't really believe him. They started showing up at his work, at his house, at the store, at his child's school, everything looking for him, even though he was working in a government position with the electrical company. And he had to leave the country because at this point he had become afraid for his life. And in doing so,
why were they after him? What were they interested in?
They were interested in the information on his friend. And apparently the friend had, I don't know, allegedly thrown a rock and hit a police officer, in the helmet, which, it's a helmet. It's not even in his head, but apparently that was it.
See.
And because he wouldn't give up the information, because he just didn't have it.
Right.
And the problem is that they don't care. They don't really
Right.
care for that. So the problem was that he then had to leave. He had to ask for political asylum. I actually had to read his personal testimony and help him translate it into English. But since he's come here, he got a job with an engineering firm. He is qualified to purchase a house. He got married to another woman that had come here from Colombia. And he's living the American dream. He's like, there is no country like this. He said, I owned a business in Cuba. I worked for the electrical company, and I worked setting up the electrical grid for the telecommunications company. This was a high-level engineer. And he said, there is no country like this one. There is no country like the United States where you can come here from anywhere, pledge your loyalty to this country, work hard, and achieve these things. And I don't think—
How was he able to escape? How was he able to get out?
That was really tough. He basically had to get on a plane and fly to Nicaragua on a business visa. So because he owned a business, he was going to Nicaragua to buy specialty items.
I see.
Was the cover. And the government didn't deny him that because he had had this storefront for a while. So he literally left the store. He left his store. He left the job. He left everything. He took his sister and his, at this point, 1-year-old nephew and left. And they walked for something like 40 days before they were then able to take a bus and get to the southern border where they were processed. And he went through the processing center, which I think took him 70 something days. So his whole journey was about 120 days.
Half a year.
Yeah, but then I want to clarify something. Then he did file for asylum, and I believe it was granted.
Yes.
So, Humberto, do you think you will return to Cuba at some point if if the regime topples and the United States can?
I hope to live that long. Yeah. Someday.
Yeah.
When things stabilize.
Well, it may be sooner than we think. I really do hope so. I lived through the Cuban Missile Crisis. People today, most people don't even know what we're talking about. David's got some inkling of what it was like. But we literally had air raid drills in the second grade where we practiced climbing down out of our desk, getting under the desk. I'm not sure how that was going to protect us from a nuclear bomb, but that's what we did. And then we had days that we practiced running home from school without being able to be picked up by our moms and dads. And it was a tense time that I vividly remember. And of course, Russia was very active in Cuba then, and that's what precipitated the crisis. They were trying to put nuclear weapons in Cuba that would be just, a stone's throw from the United States. And John Kennedy said, no, you're not. And that led us to the brink of war with Russia. But both sides backed down. We went to neutral corners and have mostly lived peacefully ever after vis-a-vis Cuba. But we've always known the threat was just right there. And I do believe that it's time to mend meaningful long-term fences with Cuba, and that requires a government that we can trust.
Yeah, agreed. Completely.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming back on. When this all resolves and you're headed to Cuba, I want to be in your entourage, and we'll go video it, and we'll make a special edition of The Truth.
Yeah, I think we could definitely do that, and it would be great.
No question.
You'll get a chance to not only see some things that, you're going to be pretty privy to locals, but then on top of that, with the language barrier, we'll be able to make sure that isn't a barrier. So it would be exciting. It would be an honor and a privilege, John, to go with you to Cuba and actually go film this and check it out. And so that,
I think that would be really interesting. I would look forward to that. Humberto and David Cancio, they are authors, scholars, historians today. And, they're father and son. What a nice relationship you all enjoy. That's to be celebrated. And they have authored Gabriel Locke. It's a 7-book trilogy, right? Or is that a trilogy? Series of books.
Yep. And the second one has come out. It came out in November, and now the next one will come out in April of 2027. So we're very excited. We're hard at work on that one already.
Good job. Good job. All right. Well, thank you, and have a great rest of your weekend.
Thank you, you too. Bye.